So what we're dealing with today is basically the remnants of what was left by the societies that were wiped away in order for them to exist, or us to exist in the present sphere of influence that is predominantly uh, Roamium in appearance, but is actually really uh, how do you say, a death cult posing as corporations, posing as a state. You know what I mean? And so that death cult has now slowly being revealed, and people are slowly understanding that this is that they've been slowly doing this, and everything that we've been talking about over the years has never really been refuted. You know what I'm saying? Like we was talking years ago that the police, I remember saying that in lectures, like in the Black Nazi thing, I remember saying that it was a unification between the NOI, the FBI, the police, and members of the so-called establishment, who we know is at that time was the military industrial complex, as well as members of the what do you would say, Knights Malta, or Moritan, what do you call it? Or Maritime, Costa Nostra stuff. Okay, but if we really get in the roots of the Knights Malta, that was actually set up by a so-called Black Catholic. Look it up. Excuse me, the Knights of Columbus. Excuse me, which became a front for the Knights Malta. See what I'm saying? Because anything that the Moors create, part of the edict was for them to parasitically become and then reduce us to not being able to deal with it. You understand? So all police in the United States would have came as a result of the act of Algeciras. Because in that act, in order for them to create the militias and stuff that would be somewhat autonomous outside the British Compact, they had to be financed. And so the finance that was the King George was not going to finance a militia against his own interest. So they had to go to the Sultan and them, and they basically put up some bread, a central bank, and then the police. What we understand is the police, the militia came out of that. And those original militias between 1677 and 17, basically 91 really, but we can be modest and reduce that to about 1785. All of them was melanated people, keeping white people locked up in pens and all that. That's facts. Like there's nothing to do with me preferring to see white people and Caucasian people in slavery or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with what the demographic was, because these people are not from here. These people never had no land here. They was brought here through the act of transportation. And transportation was another way of saying white slavery. You understand? That's why the Department of Transportation really has nothing to do with moving things, and it has more everything to do with moving people. You understand? Just like the Department of Energy has nothing to do with goddamn electricity. It has to do with the people. The energy they extracted from the people in order to create the industry, which, according to them, we're moving into the fourth industrial age. You know, see, you never heard that term, but you have heard that term before. The public term for it is New World Order, or Aquarian age. You understand? So this representation of a preponderance to move forward by reducing the human being's capacity to move forward naturally. You see, that's really where the issues come in. And so when you have the military telling their own people don't take the COVID vaccine, you got to understand the military been pumping their people with Agent Orange and everything for how long? So now all of a sudden, you mean to tell me they are literally telling their soldiers now, don't take something that the government is giving you? Think about that. What does that show? That shows a breakdown in the chain of command somewhere. this whole thing about trans that has nothing to do, as I've been telling everybody. You can check the joint I did called the Breakaway Society, and in that they're talking about Attis and the Areopagites and the Harisheps and all of these mutilation based cults. They all function from the same morbidity, and that is to change the human form to negate Allah. Because what you do to the human form, you do to Allah. You understand? The original human form. So it's not enough to get you to join them. You have to see evil. You're seduced into evil. If you was a rapper and they just brought you to the party, it was a bunch of crazy gay sex, and that's not what you was ever into, never exposed to like that. That could throw you into shock, and that naturally is gonna throw you out there to tell people and run away screaming or whatever. You know what I mean? So they can't do that. So what they have to do is they have to slowly bring you into it. They bring you into the party, and then from the party you go to the after party, then the after party, after party. Then you got the girls, the porno stars, the strippers, and then there's 2 or 3, you know, transsexuals or whatever sprinkled up in there. And then after a certain while, that pees down, and then you start going to these other parties. Then it's nothing but transsexuals. Then you think that's it. Then it takes you another one, and then it's nothing but like men. It's nothing but men with animals. Nothing with like. But the ill stuff is that none of that is what the people at the up top be doing. Like that's to compromise everybody under them. Because none of that Baphomet stuff that the Templars was doing back in the day, none of that was the real stuff. That was all the stuff that they were seeing that if people would do, they could use that to control them. This whole system of intelligence control through advertising, marketing, manipulation came from a guy they referred to as the old man in the mountain. And the old man in the mountain had a thing to fight against the so-called Christian Moors that was trying to kick them out of Peru, Jerusalem, and them. So what they would do is they would kidnap little boys from the different sectors and then bring them in this place that they had manipulated. That was like Disney World, but it literally had like milk and honey flowing from the thing, and they had the light laser beams with the stained glass, like it was next level lit, like, and they would had the women and all of that, and then the before they would drug them with the hashish, they would let them know like if you ever want to come back here when you wake up, remember you're gonna be in the real world. So to get back here, you got to do stuff for the old man in the mountain, and thus that became the whole system. And then in that, he created a whole generation of assassins of these people that would have these remarkable tales about going to heaven and stuff, and then having to serve you know the Sultan through assassination and stuff. That's why they start calling them the Hashish or the Hashishim, which then goes into Hashemite, and then Hashemite got butchered in English as assassin, as Hassassin or Assassin, right? So as you see, the manipulation always applied to the children, see what I'm saying? And the manipulation of the reality. Because from there, that's how they started, their enemies started hiring them to kill their own people. That's how good they got at. One time they brought one of the sultans to come and see if they had a variant to be able to see his power. So he was standing at the mountain and he called for one of the people to come down, and then they jumped off the cliff and just died. Like didn't care. So they emulated that in the movie Conan when Thulsa Doom, aka Darth Vader, aka uh, James Earl Jones, did the same thing. Right? So this sort of manipulation was very, very old in terms of being able to manipulate people into believing that one reality is fake over the other. That's why uh, potions and things like that was used by different societies to control their people. So the masters or the people who was really good at that type of stuff was those Moors that was coming from the ancient Hebrew line because they had learned a lot of that stuff or passed over that stuff from the old Canaanite days and all of that. So when you read the Golden Age of the Moor, I believe this book was from Moors in America. They are among the Sanhaja Berber blacks professing Judaism. These blacks were referred to as the Balfour, right? The Balfour practiced Judaism before they were overcome and absorbed by the Almoravids. The Almoravids, so this is what established the Hebrew line. So this is from an old fresco in Manoa, I believe, showing Moses and the Hebrews. You dig? So obviously, not only these are melanated people that we're referring to, which we know, yet this also smashes any argument about the so-called Hebrews or whoever being so-called Caucasian or whatever, being that they were all Moors. In Africa, they were called Ivri, Ivri. Sometimes you'll see images in your old grandmother's crib when they used to have the crosses and they used to have the cloth draped above the cross. It would say Ivri on it because that's Latin for the Hebrew. Yes, the League of Shadows and Assassin's Creed, we talking about the same people doing the same thing, who posed as criminals and stuff in order, but held the highest virtues. This is the Moors. These are the pirates. You understand? This was the culture that was created after the fall of Granada because now humanity had been put on a whole different phase. You understand? They had been put on a whole nother trajectory based upon their position that the world had put us in at the fall, at what was perceived or is perceived as the fall. You know what I'm saying? So this perspective, this false jacket that got put on us was exacerbated by those in our community that lost ties from the greater whole in the aspect of us being a cohesive people again under centralized kingdoms or governments. That whole structure was being repaired by the Moors who had established the societies or the world or what you want to say from those times immemorial up to the selling of the kingdom. You know what I mean? Chief among the main practices when you really research books, like there's a lot of books written on Moors, but a lot of the ones that are good are the ones that get into the societal aspect, like the Budget Meekin books and stuff like that. And even though this dude Meekin and a lot of these travelers that went to these places were also Freemasons and Jesuits or whatever, some of them was also brought into the secret aspect of it that makes them the protectors of Islam in a roundabout way, which is what the Prophet referred to them as. You know what I'm saying? The secret protectors of Islam. This is the Shriners in them going at. Mm-hmm. Reminds me again. The reversion or the revision back to that. So when you talk about the Hebrews, like I said, you're talking about also the Haruf or the Harufis, as I spoke to last time. And then that created a specific time for us to regroup everything. So when you talk about the Dark Ages, you talk about a successive wave of 2,136 years in multiples. And you also have to remember that the clock, that the energy that was used to bring that into existence was an ancient practice that had been passed down by these ancient Mauritanians who did become Moors, who did become Mohammedans, who were Muslims, who became Muslims, Hebrews, and Christians. You understand? So in that epoch in time, everything was being restructured. Everything was being redone. That's why being brought out of darkness with the irradiation of the intelligence and all of that was done. The diet of the world was changed. Understand? The world, not just the places we was at. We're talking about the entire world at the time. Because the perception of the Moors was that heaven, earth, and hell, you see what I'm saying, were this simultaneous expressions of Allah. The Quran doesn't make a distinction between any one of those if you really read it. Just like it says time never was when man was not in our circle 7 joint, right? So that means when in the 5% nation in the nation of Islam, when it said that the nation of Islam has no birth record, this is what they're talking about. Yet the devil does have a birth record. The devil was brought into the planet 6,000 years ago. You understand? That's a fact. That the devil itself has already copped to. So when it says that all so-called white people, WIGHT people are the devil, because you're born into something doesn't mean that you are a natural participant. But it is to say the nature, to allow that which you are born into to continue based on your nature is what makes you a part of it. You understand? When the last time you seen the police go and try to shoot a black man and white people jump out with their privilege and jump on the police and shit like they did at the Capitol building? Never. But you've seen instances where white people then pull out guns on police, shot at police, beat up police, and all of that, and don't get half the situation. So it shows that there's a definite fear of one group of people over the other. Therefore, that people that exist on the opposite side of that exist in the hell because they catch the foot to the behind. And hell represents the lower extremities, which is why our people who are banished to hell usually deal with some sort of lower extremity issue. Prostate cancer, stomach cancer, venereal stuff, right? People who tend to get caught up in high stress situations, right? Their earth is affected. Stockbrokers, traders, these type of people, what happens to them? They usually have what? Heart attacks, right? Their lungs and stuff like that usually collapse, right? People are air traffic controllers, these type of people, right? What happened to them? Read the statistics. They make movies about it, right? Then you're dealing with the people who are now in high positions now, who basically represent the heaven aspect of the physical animus, right? They now dealing with all types of head issues, aneurysms, right? How many billionaires, look up billionaires that died from aneurysms. You will bug out. Nobody is dying from that many aneurysms. That's that paid. Period. Period. Right? People who be having brain tumors and stuff. What are these? These are people who work in things like doctor situations, lawyers, judges, presidents, right? Tradesmen, right? So everybody picks what level of the tree they're focused on. And each one deals with an element, right? So in the old practice, the Mayan Moorish inter so-called dimensional, the highest gate is that of the MST, as it was written in the Thracian. Yeah, and it looked like they swapped them out. after he had it. So this is the breakdown of Allah. This is God, and this is what was being brought back to humanity, which is why Islam was the rallying cry, because Islam means peace. Anybody who practiced peace as an ideology was is Islamic. You understand? And the numbers that go into the physical genetic makeup of man and woman as the physical vessel or representation of Allah on earth as it is in heaven is manifested through the biomagnetic polymer that we understand as melanin, right? There's a blog called True Dreads. Check them out. They're pretty dope. This in 1920, an English biochemist detailed how to extract melanin from black people. This book was called The Extraction of Melanin from Skin with Dilute Alkali. 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 Now that's funny because in the X-Men movies, where they put the adamantium into Wolverine, that place was called Alkali Lake, right? Showing you how the life is imitating the art and vice versa. It was found that if the skin were soaked in boiling water, the outer layer, which contained practically all the pigment, could be readily removed by scraping. The layer of 2,200 kilograms was washed with alcohol either to remove the grease and was boiled in 100 degrees Celsius, and the sodium hydroxide for 1 hour under the reflux conductor. It was allowed to settle and the dark liquid decanted and filtered. The process was repeated with successive portions of the same. This maniac was one of the progenitors of that. This is 1920. He also was one of the scientists that worked in the uh, Nazi program, and that process was patented. Okay, okay. So within that, we have the melanosome, the melanin, the melanosome, and the melanocyte. Each one of us right now is walking around with about $40 million worth just based on our melanin alone. You right now sitting in your house are worth $40 million. That's on top of the 100,000 that they set up at the time of the birth and matured at 18 through the BC and the SSN. This is facts. Can't be a conspiracy if they're doing it. And they've been doing this to black people since 1920. Why do you think lynching was so important? What do you think they did to all of these black bodies? There's a whole underground market of white people to this day that still sell souvenir merchandise of cut up black people and stuff from those days and today. You think Jeffrey Dahmer just thought about doing that one day and just came out of nowhere and did that? This was the common practice here after a certain time. Once the wars and stuff went into high gear, everybody was game and they was taking people from different places on the continent and putting them in other places in the continent, renaming them, rebranding them, and using them for stuff like this. But by the 20s, it became a science. This is also why Planned Parenthood was founded by Margaret Sanger, maybe about 5 to 10 years later. Excuse me, the Nigger Project was associated with her. This is facts. The nigger project became Planned Parenthood. And so all the aborted fetuses and all of the souped up melanin and stuff that they get, this is what they're able to do with it. So in here, it says that an article submitted in the River Road Recess says that pigment ubiquitous in nature, melanin is extremely difficult to isolate and refine in large quantities. It has long been known, boom, 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 that it possesses the physical and electrical properties, but few commercial applications have been developed due to the historically high cost. What's the high cost if it's coming from black people? They deaths. You understand? You and I have always been the industry. Get the book, The Delectable Negro. Cannibalism in Western society didn't become a no-no until the 1920s. Isn't that funny? It was, yeah, we read that. Putting the skin in the oil. Boom. The U.S. military is using melanin for military applications, armor, weapons, and energy storage because of the electrical quantitative product, byproduct that melanin produces. The electricity that they talk about in the melanin is what sparks somebody who is gifted in things like basketball to be able to excel and do stuff with the ball without seemingly thinking about it. Those electrical impulses are so substantaneous that it's in sync with the very fabric of reality. That's why it seems so superhuman, because the melanin vibrationally, electrically syncs up itself so well that you can literally become the master of whatever you allow it to help you master. And by the same reality, if you are taught to hate it, it can then reduce itself, make itself dormant, and produce a reality by which you are around other things and other things that will then take that melanin from you. The God gene, the modern science is turning up a possible reason why the religious right is flourishing under the secular liberals are extinct. It turns out that our DNA may predispose humans towards religious faith. So what they're saying is that the melanin, because this is melanin they talking about, that is evidence of what I'm saying, that it is Allah, it is us, it is the God gene, right? That they are striving to isolate, but they can't. So what they're trying to do is separate the spiritual component from the physical component. They refer to that as the VMAT2, right? Ma'at2, VMAT2, right? That's what the vaccine is there to disassociate you from at its core. Because these things, like Bill Gates and these things that refer to itself as Bill Gates and these things are not even real. They're not even real things. They're not even real people. You understand? So this God gene and this, application that the military is using. Remember, I told y'all last week, this is what they coat the bottom of the space shuttle with. That's why it's black for the reentries when they go into the upper atmosphere. But they don't go nowhere beyond that because they don't have the melanin, again, the God gene, to be able to escape. So they are literally trying to create suits of us to put on so they can do so, be themselves inside of us. The way to do that is to get us to want to be more like them. That opens up the possession. Remember, the vampire cannot come into the domain unless you invite it. So if you invite it by dressing like it, looking like it, having sex with it, eating its food, right? Living its culture, right? You've already given them access to it. And all of these people are being used as mules for this understanding because we have gone through the different aspects of the Constitution. You had the national constitution, the territorial constitution, then a municipal constitution of what we refer to the United States, which was used to be called Rome on the Potomac, right? So that whole area essentially was always the foreign territory designated for whatever administrative body was going to act as territorial rule, if you will, over the dominion outside of that, or whatever dominions could fall under that. You understand? The United States is fully aware of the extraordinary benefits of potential of melanin. That's why they want to use it. The army would evolve overnight if their current technology were replaced with melanin-based technologies. Remember, I talked to you about the fourth industrial age. That is the age of what they call transhumanism, where they want to link you up with machines and computers. This is why the Matrix was pumped, why the Terminator was pumped. Terminator was the machine trying to stop the man. The Matrix was about the man trying to stop the machine. But if you really look at the Terminator, the very first one that started it, it was really about the virus. The virus that was implanted into the computer by John Connor in the future to get the computer to destroy itself in the past. How does that make sense? Because when you look at the movie The Terminator, Linda Hamilton's character, if we was to look at the character how it was played, she was already in a relationship, sexual relationship with a dude in the movie, a so-called serious relationship. That's why when dude got clapped and all of that, it was so traumatic for her. That was her dude. Like they was about to. So who's to say that the baby that she said was John's was really John? John was programmed to go back and do that unbeknownst to himself. Excuse me, the guy who plays John's father. He sent back so that way the machine believes that they believe that this John is the same John that's going to win everything in the future. When there's no probability that that even happened. What I'm starting to realize is that what we perceive as the AI, the computer, the Skynet, the Legion, whatever, Genesis, the Agenda 21, the D-Wave, the IBM Beast computer, whatever you want to call it, that thing is getting them to replicate itself by getting us to believe that it has the ability to do the things that it's doing. You understand? Meaning that while we're looking at the movie for the sake of, oh, he's going back in time and he's stopping, the computer's trying to stop him. What really happened was that, remember, a prophecy is something that is manifested from a human belief, and computers don't believe in things like that. So for a computer, a rational, logical identity, a rational, logical so-called entity now to become aware of itself and to then be fixated on a prophecy means that it was already defective from the beginning. Because in essence, prophecies don't exist. So really it's an analogy to basically to show us that we're more in control of the reality and the AI and all this type of stuff than we really think. It really depends upon our given understanding of the situation. So we don't understand that we are the basis of a military industrial complex project that started from 1920 to be able to harvest melanin from us in a greater content to be able to create power lines and computers that run faster and move at the speed that we do, which then would make us obsolete as a people. But you can't do that because that's genocide. So what you got to do is marginalize the people and get the people not to believe in what they really are, what they really have. I'm showing you. This is where all of the missing black people are going. This is where all of the missing uteruses that they want to give to trans people and all of that now. Trans don't just mean gender. Trans mean transhuman. Remember this movie? In this movie, Anthony Mackie plays the melanated pawn of the military industrial complex that's now trying to train a young black man, another so-called clone, right? Who's just human at this point because he don't have no knowledge of himself. He working for the man against himself. And as they're walking, he says, "Do you ever wonder why they chose somebody that looked like me to have all of this hardware and to be this face for this or whatever?" And he was like, "Nah, why?" He was like, "Because it's a psyop." He said the military can't afford to go in there looking the way that they used to. They gotta have faces of people that they could trust, which then breaks the myth now, if we go into reality, of black men being so scary that the very sight of them makes that. It's the exact opposite. Think about it. When Obama was about to, before he came in, the country was over. Niggas was done with Bush. Katrina had gone down. They slaughtered all of those black people. It had come out about the oil. It was over. So what did they do? They brought his cousin in. They brought his black cousin in, who's born in Hawaii. Just didn't tell niggas it was Hawaii, Kenya, right? And by the end of the whole thing, established the gay mafia in politics, in open politics, and established a 10-year slave state. It's been 10 years. Libya ain't no better. Worse. You could go there and buy black people now. Where you think all that? Where you think that? Why you think they're not shutting it down? You know how many army bases in Libya? The cyber program. But look, cyber, saber, sabir, right? The About Me section of the government site says the Small Business Innovation Research, Sabir, the government plans to utilize melanin for military applications. Melanin is a biological polymer that possesses many desirable properties with clear army applications. You know how many black people, stupid black people, is out here bleaching their skin? They depreciating the value of their merchandise. Are you stupid? You know what this means for original people as a collective? That means that each one of us can be insured up to $40 million off top based upon the commodity value of melanin, based upon all the human trafficking, based upon the police, based upon that. You want to stop police brutality and all of that? Let's try something like that and see what happens. No, no British-run Esquire company could do it either. It would have to be an indigenous company. It would have to be somebody that is actually from the land, because then you see what I'm saying. The land is then the back, because these people are born from the soil. So the very soil by which we are born from is not only evidence of our supremacy over it, but the fact that we are the leading commodity in the world. That's more than palladium. And now you're talking about military contract. That means that black people have to be protected the same way that you got to protect rhinos and all that type of shit. You got to remember that these black people are now listed not only as human capital and commodities, but are verifiable security interests just based on their color. If niggas found out that they could start getting bonds and shit set up just for being black, just for having melanin, you mean to tell me if I just have a black baby and those black babies have black babies, that basically can back the full GDP of an entire nation of people for the next 200, 300, 500 years based upon the current stock value, which means then I could get a stipendized situation out of my own estate trust based upon the equity invested in myself, meaning that as long as I keep myself healthy and clean and pure water and all of that, I could just be paid off for the rest of my life. These black people, you understand? They would it would be a bum rush of black relationships. It would be an onslaught of black relationships, so-called black relationships, i.e., melanated relationships across the world. You understand? Overnight, we would bankrupt the entire world. You want to use racism? You want to put a commodity, a price on my head? What I'm showing you is they have a price on each one of our heads. This is what all of this is funding. This is DARPA. All of this is DARPA, Jason Society stuff I've been talking about for over 20 years, man. But now they bold enough to show. I remember I used to tell you I was the only one that used to report on the Melanin Conference that these white people have every year. You feel I was bugging. This was the result. Now they're making movies about it to sell it to you. And look who's selling it to you. The Falcon. This right here is Vanta Black. This is the blackest, ultra blackest melanated substance in the universe right now. This is like vibranium. It's so black that it doesn't reflect any light. Remember X-Men? You always got to bring it back to the movie because that's how they tell you. The movie. Remember X-Men with the Hyper Sentinels that they took from Mystique's blood, right? And now they was able to shape shift and produce electrical currents and stuff out of their faces, right? The same Terminator in the feminine Terminator, where they try to remake the whole thing, make it all women. That's the whole thing. They're getting rid of men, they're getting rid of women, using movies and stuff like that to do it. This Vanta Black, you talking about murder black, if you used to put this on your car, you would not be seen. Police are starting to put these on their cars now, where at night you don't see them. All you would see is the decal. They are literally using you and not telling you. And our black people in positions of power are the ones that are doing it. They're the ones selling us out. They're the ones participating in it, making the movies to make it cool. Peep this movie. And then the dude that he's talking to is the same dude from Snowfall. That dude is an African playing an American so-called drug dealer. Again, another African playing the worst part of the so-called black male American experience. Because we're only organized when we're selling drugs, right? There's a book you can get, a novel that was is called Melanin Apocalypse. Get that book. They don't want our us. They want everything except what makes our soul us. All of the TV shows have young, so-called mulatto, light-skinned black women going all out to be sexual uh, slaves for white males. The black male is usually gay, and or he's either a white girl or jail or something where they can't just maintain a relationship. Meanwhile, the so-called original so-called woman, who in this case is not, well, they do it to the dark-skinned women too, but it's always her with somebody else, paired with somebody else. That's a psyop. And it's all to get you and I to devalue each other so that way they can put us more on the natural melanin for avoidable EMP shielding. How is this a conspiracy? Where do they get enough natural melanin to do this? Because it says natural melanin. I showed you where. The process by extracting the melanin from the skin through the through the alkali bleaching, the skinning of human beings. That's what the lynchings and all of this stuff has really been about. That's what the police killings, the real ones, was really about. That's what the organ harvesting is really about. Taking organs and uteruses out of real black women and putting them in men. And getting men to devalue women so much that they become women. Look up augmented Chinese births. What they're not telling you is that in the late 80s and all of that, after Tiananmen Square, based upon the breeding programs, the females in the culture drastically decreased, where it was a 75% male and the rest female, to the point where females were dying, killing themselves. They had to create what they call suicide nets. Research the suicide nets in China. People hurling themselves off of buildings. So to keep them from doing that and putting them back to work, they put nets outside the 1,000-story buildings. This is what these stupid boule Negroes and the rest of these people have been trying to pump and have been supporting. And now it's coming to pass. And they on the menu too. The conduct of systematic duty to study the naturally produced melanin is the ability of life in safe storage conditions as well. Camps develop scalable production methods while retaining desirable energy transduction properties, meaning how we take the melanin from the people. To be derived, melanin. This will be used to seed additional development in multiple application areas from vehicle fabrication. Remember, they said this is coming from natural melanin. So you think they just taking it from plants? When we have the most melanin on the planet, the best, ours is even better than the Africans. If it wasn't, then they stay in Africa. Why they always over here impersonating us? Think about it. Because these are the ones, when they talk about the ones that sold you out, sold you into slavery. Why you ain't never heard of a DNA test by which one of the Africans is trying to trace their roots to some of the American Indians here? Why you ain't never heard of a DNA test that do that? Why every DNA test a Native American do come back East Asian and Native American? They come back more East Asian than Native American, but they gonna still say that they Native American. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that. They say they DNA tell on them. Well, your DNA says that you're more what you call it, uh Siberian, East Asian, than Americans. So how are you from the original people from America? We are the first peoples. No, you're not, because the congressional record says different. You mean to tell me these people who lived in these things, who don't claim this, they can't claim none of this. You mean to tell me that these people who live like this, who use the fat from the buffalo and all of that, who's out there living off the land, eating the sticks and the twigs, worshiping the wind and the corn? That's what you're telling me. You mean to tell me these people built this? That's what you're saying? You're saying that you're the first people that built this when we came across you, you lived like this for hundreds of years, according to you, at least from the 13th century. That could be documented from the 13th century. And what happened in the 13th century? Well, there was an invasion by Moors that looked like us, that enslaved people that looked like them and brought them over. And then after the whole thing was done, they couldn't go back. So we just gave them the reserves and the land to live off the buffalo and all that, because that's what they had been doing before Genghis and Kublai Khan and them yoked them up to then fight. But they always lost. So they was passed on from one thing to the next. So you had the Sisiskia, you had the Anayun Awiya, and then you had their wards who became known as the Cherokees. You understand? You had the Sisiskia, who's, and then they Indian wards who they called the Blackfoot. You had the Tasalagi, right? Or the Muskelge, right? And then you had the Muskogee Indian government. You understand? People did not originate here. They did not have the melanin to do that. And the ones that did, we refer to as the Zambos. And they had a higher percentage rate amongst us because they was directly claimed by whatever more, you know what I'm saying, bought their moms. Let's is that simple. It's not racism. We always, it's like we could always talk about the old west when we talk about how we was always getting the foot put in the behind and all that. But whenever we start showing and proving that no, we came into the slave game late, meaning that we fell victim to it based upon our interpersonal relationships and fighting with the type of kingdoms amongst each other. So there, yes, we definitely got to eat that, but no. Chinese slave girls being landed as native daughters. Shameful traffic in the Oriental chattels. Remember, Orient mean here. So these is enslaved Siberians left over, right, from the Tartarin campaign. That's now being passed around, and then their children come to be known again as the mestizos, or the so-called Native American, Mexican-looking Siberians we see today. You understand? Same thing here. See? So again, whenever you want to go and take over a market of something, you try to go in and depreciate it to the greater market, make people think that it's not as valuable as it is. So what? People start to sell. So that way it gets to a point where it gets so low that you could just come in and then just boom, take it over, right? Now apply that to life as an original so-called being on planet Earth. See what I'm saying? I just showed you what heaven, hell, and earth is. It's always been there. The moon is the only vehicle in the universe that don't spin. Nobody has ever seen the other side of it. It was brought into being at a certain point. We are the people that they refer to as the people before the moon, the proselytes. Once the moon was brought in, the recalibration of that entered into one age or epoch into the next. And so we go from being a little less non-physical to being more physical. So that way, by the time it goes into the epoch of what they refer to as the Atlantean into the Aryan age, which is we're at the end of that now. You see what I'm saying? They're now trying to upgrade it now into something artificial by bringing the artificial into the biological, by making the biological believe that it needs the artificial. You understand? All corporations that they have created were always created to kill people and control them. The money is the byproduct. But in the end, that's what it was all about. Get the book, The Creature of Jekyll Island. Get the book, How Wall Street Created a Nation, how they basically created and took over the original Republic of Panama and turned it into a holding company, another little British East India company. But these are aristocratic so-called black people and white decoys working together to do it. That's the Freemasonic bond and secret. Look at this. Judas and the Black Messiah. Bait, traitor, enemy of the state, snitch. Would you, as a so-called original man in your right mind, even if it was a good part, take part in any movie where you're labeled as that? A sane man with morals. I'm not talking about you as an artist. Even as an artist, would you do that? In each one of these movies, the theme is the same. The black man is the melanin. These are all representations of the Mackie character. This is the type of black man they want. That's why they went from growing up watching movies where the black man was always getting kicked down to all of a sudden whenever you watch a cop movie now all of a sudden the sergeant was a black man. Then you start seeing the doctor shows, all of a sudden the new doctor is a black man. Then you see the soap operas, all of a sudden a black family comes onto the property. That's how um the Jeffersons started. They started from All in the Family, from Archie Bunker show, the old Jew racist. And then the black people moved in during the time of civil rights. But he was a so-called black racist. But in reality, in real life, he's a homosexual. Sherman Hemsley. Then they make the movie, their show with the neighbors now, and then the neighbor is the reverse of the neighbors he came from. Now it's a black woman, Roxy Roca, from the islands again, always an island person acting like an American, right? American born, right? And then she married to the white man. But in real life, that's what's happening. And then she's Lenny Kravitz's father. She said that's how she got the job. She said she showed up and she read for it, and they was kind of wondering if they was going to do it. She said, "Well, let me show you a picture of my husband." Show her a picture of her husband. He's like, "You got the job." This facts. So what? These people just come out of nowhere. They just worked hard, right? Just came out of nowhere and just did all of this. And it just so happened to be that her husband was one of the chairs of the NAACP, right? At the time when they was trying to smear what's his name, stop Willie Brown from running, and They was trying to go against the Panthers, which I understand because they was communists. So what you gonna do? So what I'm showing you is that this all these tools is lying. If they not talking about none of this, they lying. This is the problem. This is where all of the problems of not having a nationality is coming from. You don't have a nationality, they can suck you up, do this, do that, and then say because they got you an award of a state status, they got the right to do all of this. Sell you out, right? While at the same time telling their own army officers all of a sudden, nah, don't take that. Because essentially it's an antigen. And what is an antigen? A poison, an abortifact. So these are the representations of the only type of so-called black men that are acceptable in mainstream media. These are the only types that will be accepted as heterosexual. You can't be a powerful black man in your own thing. You got to be connected to them in some way. You got to be a cop. You got to have a white daddy. You got to have a white mama. You got to have a white sister. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to be gay. It got to be drugs. You see? Or you got to be amoral, which means that there's no dichotomy because that's how they see you. They want everybody to see black males, specifically, or black people, as commodities, as expendable, to make it easier to dispatch them so that way they could take their melanin and turn it into machines that they can use, you see, to propel themselves into a reality that they ultimately know they cannot go into, regardless to what type of skin they put on. Didn't I tell you that they liquefied Patrice Lumumba's body? Didn't I tell you that? That's facts. Didn't they say they liquefied Nat Turner's body and drank it and ate it? See, our ancestors was aware of that enemy when they lost when they finally lost the campaign. They thought it was better for us to just go along with the program and just kind of keep our heads down and just kind of, deal with whatever. But every war has been about making us the bottom. So now they're trying to propel the Chinese people above you. And we have all these examples of Chinese store owners shooting black children, shooting black women, shooting black men, right? All these examples of that. Nothing, nothing. But now that he done signed over the power grid or access to the power grid in order for them to establish the weather situation with them, which was the attack on Texas, because Texas, again, is the seat of the Republic, which is also the seat of the old Almohad Empire. So, again, this is also a subtle attack at the Moors, you see, while our people are caught up in, again, the tribal infighting because these guys are all down with it. When all of this is being funded by the same people. All of this we know is coming from the same people. They're doing this, and they have been doing it. So these thousands of millions of things of black people being taken and missing and all of that. This is where they're going. They make TV shows about it. Wasn't Black Lightning about that? That they now about to cancel? Old towns, science towns, where they experiment on people, right? So remember, we just came out of the year of the rat. Now we're in the year of the metal ox. So they want to turn up the machine aspect of it. That's why the nanites and stuff like that is important. But that's only if you inject that stuff into you. Whatever marjolins and stuff like that exists on the outside of the parameters that's falling through and people getting in their skins and stuff, you can still get that out of you to a certain extent. That stuff can still be somewhat remedied. Whereas all of the rest of the stuff, like I said, the stuff here, this is all the psychological residue that's left over. You know what I'm saying? That we have now come to identify as being acceptable here. When all three phases of that government is basically phased out. So here's like an example of what I'm saying. How can people, so-called black people, have been slaves when there was people like John Chavis, who was a full-blooded so-called Negro man born in 1763, ran a school for white people in North Carolina. The rich sent their sons and daughters to him to be trained for entrance to the university. Amongst his students were the several who were later distinguished as U.S. Senators W.P. Mang, J.P., and Governor Charles Manley. Right? Chavis was educated privately at Princeton University and experimented to see whether Negroes could absorb a college education. He was noted for his dignity in manner, his purity and diction, simplicity and style, knowledge of the classics. He was also a veteran of the Revolutionary Wars. After the Nat Turner Rebellion, he, like other Negroes, were forbidden to preach. He then wrote sermons that were bestsellers, and he died in 1831. You see? So what you have here is somebody who was a prisoner of the Revolutionary War, who was then brought over to the so-called Negro charity schools, where they were inducting these foreign people enough to give them education by which he could then prosper. Because the people who did that looked like him. But then that's in contrast to this. On whites, the South's most noted guerrilla chief was Henry Berry Lowry, a Negro for 10 years dominated Robeson County, North Carolina, Tuscarora. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, he gathered a small army of Negroes and Negro Indians, see, Moors and Moors, and opened war on the white people, killing all who did not flee. Mounted on a fleet of horses, he and his gallant band ravaged the surrounding counties, and Berry continued until he was defeated by the KKK. When? In 1871. What happened in 1871? Yes, the act to create the United States, right? Where Rome now had official sway over the national politics of the country. Because now the last of the freedom fighters have been shut down. You see? You see? Which then laid the groundwork for this dude to employ the children. Because remember, the whites, or the whites were the people who were English born, whether they were English born over there or English born over here. The free whites were the Moors that were brought over here under Transportation Act, along with the white slaves, who the Moors would work as indentures, and the white slaves would work on the plantations in the tobacco field. See, so the free white persons were anybody that wasn't Caucasian, considered Caucasian, but not Caucasian like Hindu, Caucasian like Slavic white. That's why the definition in the black law is so distinct. So these so-called white free whites, who themselves were foreign born, but now they were the children, or they were themselves were the ones who worked off their indenture being sent over here from England. Then after their indenture could do what they want, they can now either petition to become part of the republic, or they could petition under the Sultan to get their nationality under him. Because if not, they would still technically be subjects of George, you see, and they would rather pay the Sultan or everybody else than pay England, you see. There's a difference. There's always difference. And what they do is switch the identity of the person. So you could be with somebody physically or whatever, and then because this person's in a bodysuit, you don't know that it's actually the opposite sex or the thing of what you think it is or who you think it is. And they think that that's a reality, and that just destroys the basic tenets of what this reality is. So in some instances, it's good because it forces you to attune your senses enough to what's really going on. But at the other side, it's a constant barrage of literary, psychological information and propaganda being given to you with faces that look like yours, which then in real life forces you not to trust your real people. But the people you're looking at are not real. They don't really exist. They exist in your mind and your television. They don't exist in the physical world the way you and I exist because they are from top to bottom manipulated. And any one of them that says that they're not is definitely down. Understand? So the white people that we're dealing with today are descended from these type of people. Don't these look like most of the people that you see every day walking around? And so-called white people. But these are Slavic, so-called Indians. Now, this is not to get into them as who they are, their origin. We already know of that. What I'm saying is you can't be a Slav if this is what a Slav is. Understand? Therefore, you could never be a slave. You know what I'm saying? Therefore, the term slave that was put into play in modern liturgy after Reconstruction was definitely a psychological operation to not make black people slaves, but to make black people synonymous with the idea of being slaves. Because they couldn't be, because they were the ones that were calling the shots and blowing up everything and obviously shooting and doing what they was doing to white people. Didn't we just read that? We just read that. And we just showed and proved that they was living, that the so-called Native American, as he's referring to himself, was really living in little more than squalor. But we have evidence records in places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Wilmington race riots, where the black people actually owned the towns, built the buildings, did all of that. And these descendants of these people and the white people I just showed you came through and blew everything up. Right? That's what we just saw. And that because they were the descendants of the slaves that were used as tribute to pay off the bays and the ills or whatever that was over here doing the big and heavy lifting, they was made subject, right? So when we read about the so-called subjugation of the Americas and all of that, all of that is fake. Like how they talk to us about it, whatever. Like we're better figuring it out for ourselves than have any of these guys. Because all of these guys, especially when they fight specifically against nationality, especially when they come out specifically against, like I'm not against people who refer to themselves as Hebrew. I'm not against people who refer to themselves as Black. I'm not against people who refer to themselves as Nuwapian or Hebrew or whatever. I'm not against anybody that calls themselves anything. All I'm saying is don't call me out my name and try to make me a part of something that I have to be in order to fit your argument, because that's the same thing that the trans people is doing. You want me to accept you as you are when you couldn't accept yourself as you were. And then you want to make laws to force me to do that when I don't want to have nothing to do with you. Then you want to create warped arguments that if I don't go out with one of you or one of them or whatever, that somehow I'm something's wrong with me. No, no. They turned the whole thing against nationality because that's the last bastion. That's the last thing that they know people hold on to, man. You're not going to be able to stop people from having their culture. Every time these people try to do that, everything fall out for them. Then they got to start all over. They got to go back and then regroup what's left of them, go back in the hole, figure out, allow society to regroup itself, bring itself back from the brink, and then find a way in. That's how they always do it. Right here, what you're seeing is the original Europeans. This is where the Europeans come from, who they call the Combe or the Capella man. It's the ancestor, they say, of some, of all. Him, the Cheddar man, all of these people is original. All of these people were builders, as well as hunter-gatherers. This is Europa, a version of Europa, who they refer to as the Venus of Willendorf. This is who they ritualized Sarah Barton as when they brought her there and did all them experiments on her. Because they are our undertakers. They are the white blood cells of this realm. Because it's the bottom. The beauty is the mask for their future nature and how it's distributed and destroyed above everything. So all of the black European nobility descend from these dudes, who then mixed in with the Scotians and the so-called Egyptians and then the Typhonians, who they call the Fomorians, and all of that over the years. But this was also at a time when the entire thing was connected, what they call ancient Galloway. But again, these old Moorish terms, these old Moorish cities and stuff were just put out there. Speaking of which, everybody said, oh, well, you kind of a Moor because you are Moorish and yada yada. This is from one of these uh, dictionaries. Ish indicates of the nationality of. Where's the number two definition then is somewhat or rather, right? But the top definition is what? Of a nationality, hence more-ish, meaning then by definition and usage, the term more represents a nation. Correct? So again, this is what I'm saying about these melanin thieves. They trump up the stuff and make it look like they have the right to do what they're doing based upon them being obstructed and not realizing that this kidnapping of the original melanated blood has been coming for a long time. Because what these white families would do is towards the end, they would kidnap the elder Moors or the princes and the sheiks, and if they couldn't marry into the family, the only way into the bloodline, based upon the old draconian rites, would then be to kill the person, impale them, or whatever they do to them, liquefy them, or drain the blood, and then have the blood drank by everybody in the family, thus creating the bond now between the old black family and the white new family. You've seen this in almost every American horror story episode that they done put on TV. This is the type of magic and stuff these black aristocratic European Moors of the Grimaldi line and the Europa line infused over here through their old draconian practices. Which ain't got nothing to do with us. Our version of what the voodoo was the voodoo. But the voodoo was really old Mayan or Hopi folk magic. Get the book Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. It's another example of what I'm talking about. Purvis's advocacy of the rights that was rooted highly and deeply in the convictions of human rights. He believed strongly that the struggle for equality for blacks could not be separated from that of women and American Indians, of Irish nationalists demanding home rule of all minorities. Right? This objected to the all case associations based on color alone and rejected the term African American. There was not a single African in the United States, he told Philadelphia audience in 1886. We are to the manner born. We are Native American. That's different than the Native American Party that we'll see a little later, started by a Jew named Irving. Purvis's position on human rights undoubtedly stemmed in part from his own mixed race background. His grandmother, Dido Badaraka, was born in Morocco, which means Philadelphia. Purvis was described as a full-blooded Moor of magnificent features and great beauty. She had crisp hair and stately manner. In approximately 1766, at the age of 12, she was captured by a slave trader along with an Arab girl who was her slave. And the two had been enticed to a mile or two out of the city where they had lived, you see, which was Morocco, which is Philadelphia, and that they had been caught. They were seized and loaded on the backs of camels and carried to the slave market on the coast, where they would be loaded onto a slave and transported to Charleston, South Carolina. Islam, weren't camels indigenous to the United States up until Reconstruction? How did they get her on the boat? Did you see any mention of a boat taking her from wherever this camel place was to Charleston, North Carolina? Does anybody see that? No. What you see is somebody being taken from Morocco, which was Philadelphia, which we can prove by the CIA document, the CIA map of Morocco from their documents, referring to it as that, which was Philly, which was where the original post office was, right? And they were seized and loaded on the backs of camels taken to Charleston. Dido, and remember, Dido was the founder of Carthage, right? So she was a Moorish prince named after the goddess that founded the glorious Phoenician, Carthaginian, Carthaginian nation of Carthage. And this is his grandmother. Imagine who your grandmother was. See what I'm saying? So boom, they were boom. Dido was bought by a kind white woman named Day or Deas, who educated her, treated her as a companion, and left instructions that she was to be freed when the woman died 9 years later in 1775. Look at that. Because you can't keep no Moors on slave on the books like that, because they was all at this time still paying money to the Sultan, right? Right. So anybody that was kidnapped was a Moor who was in the lands of Morocco, was being kidnapped and brought outside of that, which is why they brought it to the coast of Charleston. Right? Exactly. Yes, full-blooded American Moor from Morocco, aka America. All of that is a result of this, because King Edward I of England was the first to expel the Roman Jew. The Roman Jew money doon in France, Holland, and Germany decided it would be poetic justice if they tried their planned revolutionary tactics in England first. They used their underground agents or cells to cause trouble between the king and his government, employees and labor, ruling class, and workers. That's just what they did with your man Trump, right? church and state. The plotters injected controversial issues into politics and religion to divide people into two opposing camps, right? Happening right now, right? First, they divided the people of England into Catholics and Protestants. Then they divided the Protestants into conformists and nonconformists. When Charles I was brought into the disagreement of the Parliament of a Roman Jew, the money doomed a Holland named Manasseh ben Israel, a Moor, his agents contact Oliver Cromwell. They offered him a large sum of money if he would carry out their plan to overthrow the British throne. Manasseh ben Israel, who is Manasseh ben Israel? He is one of the original so-called Moorish Jews of the Almohad dynasty that we just talked about in the beginning of the lecture. Remember those Moors who was ruling Almohad and they got kicked out by the Almoravids, right? Where do you think they went? Remember, 1751, the British Empire said all of those Moors displaced from that could come over there and work as British consuls and traders for them with impunity. See, all of these are black people we reading about. He reorganized the Roundheads into a model army. He provided them with the best arms and equipment and money he could buy. Once the conspiracy was underway, hundreds of trained revolutionaries were smuggled into England and were absorbed into the Roman Jew underground. See? So the Roman Jews are the Jesuit-backed organizations today, you see, that fund these people that we see on the internet, based upon them being compromised through jail or however they were compromised at the outset of their coming into the public perception. You understand? And so they're able to do things and get away with things because they have the ability to manipulate the situation based upon who brought them into it. You understand? And who or what agenda that they're serving. You understand? So in the ancient, let's say, Mauritanian, so Carthaginian sense, El and Ashira live at the top, and then under them is Yahweh, Baal, right? And then the council. From there we have the earthly realm, and then from there we have the realm of the dead. See what I'm saying? So everything corresponds to the same octave because we're all functioning under these same parameters. We just don't realize it because they've created the veil of time, i.e., the intersystemus, the recreation of the eradication of the time before 1581, and then using that as a particular marker to constantly use uh, that instance against us by manipulating us to believe that the heavens and the earth and all of that exists outside of our perception of reality. What do you think a baby's perception of heaven is? You don't know, but you do. You just don't remember. Baby's perception of heaven to us would be, or God would be, its mother. But why is the mother the first thing spoken of? Because the father is what is always unseen. Not unseen like not there, but unseen as the one that gave the life to the earth to manifest and watch the miracle of its creation. So we exist in the realm of Il and Ashira, which they would refer to as Jesus and Mary and what all of the different whatever. But the oldest aspects of that come from the non-physical, which represented where we, as melanated beings, spiritual beings, exist. This is the VMAT2 that they trying to shut down. Understand? To get you to just strictly be hit in the realm of the dead, which is hell, the bottomless pit. What do they say when the aliens take people? They always do anal probing in them, right? And now we done found out in the CIA reports these aliens was Area 51 people abducting people in alien suits, telling them they was aliens and drugging them up. This is all in the paperwork, man. They've been running the psychological operation since Orson Welles went on with the War of the Worlds psyop on the radio. Everything come from somewhere. This is the Shiloh people who they based the Klingon people on. You know what I'm saying? Because the Africans were more into body modifications. We stopped being more into body modifications after a certain time, due to the European influence. But they started to come back more into play in our culture, like towards the late 70s, 80s, into the 90s. So I'm showing you, like, all of this come from somewhere. These people ain't never created nothing. What's his name? Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, they ain't created the Klingons. They already been there. And they was the heavy people, the Shiloh people, very heavy. People don't mess with them. And they bang with the red. People ain't creating nothing. So based on how the whole thing is going with the Rona thing, because it's a voluntary experimental procedure, anybody involved in it technically is waiving any rights to go against them, because they tell you from the door that it's voluntary. And then anything with 13 pages of side effects, you gotta wonder what's gonna do to you. So all you gotta do is avoid it. They cannot make it mandatory because of the fact that it is killing everybody openly. So they gotta keep using the media to go over and keep droning in people's heads that the people who are dying right after it are not dying from the situation. Because they're disassociating you from your mind. They want to disassociate you from your melanin. So that way your melanin is more susceptible to them. So that way the nanites that you get through the exposure by breaking the body, the brain, the blood barrier, by going through the experiment, which is the injection, which is the vaccine, is then injecting you with this thing that is now psychologically breaking you down and giving you, opening you up to viruses that you never had, to protect you from a virus that you never had. You know what I'm saying? So according to the Nuremberg trial, Article 6, Section 3, in no cause should a collective agreement or consent of a community leader or any other authority substitute for individuals' informed consent. That means so-called Bill Gates or the personages or the demon posing as Bill Gates has no right to impose none of this, because he wasn't elected by nobody in the world to say or do any of this. He's just paying people money. That's really the people's in the world money. Leaders should be aware that mandating masks on citizens of a nation and preventing their access to food, healthcare, transport, or education if they don't comply is a war crime. Masks or any other medical intervention must remain voluntary. That's a Geneva Code etched in stone that has never been done. So what they did was create the FDA to create a fake agency to give regulation on what can pass. So all of this is how red dye number 5, blue number 6, red 80, you see them saying purple 9 ended up in your Kool-Aid and everything else, and in your now laters and in your jingles and in all of that stuff you used to eat, because all of those were Nuremberg chemicals that they were able to slide through the FDA and bypass the Nuremberg Code, because they were only targeted to so-called black people or undesirable populations that were already under the MK Naomi MK Ultra program to begin with, that have been proven to be connected to the Tuskegee experiment and everything else that they've been doing to so-called black people since then. These are facts. These are the same people who work with the NYPD and the FBI and the so-called greater military establishment to provide bodies for them to find all of the biochemical and biomolecular properties of melanin, enough to be able to do the shit they're doing. So to me, anybody saying anything else, it's all coming from this. This is the mass sacrifice that in some generation they get one of us. Some generations they get a lot. Some generations they get some. And what's happening, like I said, is that all these people is down with. So any celebrity on TV is down. Like you can't, at this point, you can't even, you understand? That's why they need YouTube people, because nobody believes celebrities anymore. They got, imagine growing up and seeing Robert Redford on a regular TV show. You'd have never seen that. He was on his way out of here. They dusted that nigga off for Marvel. Like, nope, nigga, you gotta work. You're gonna represent our true intent as the Hydra leader. Now you're gonna be the bad guy. Everybody loved you in the past. Now everybody's gonna hate you. And that's what they do to every dude on their way out. Look what they did to Charlie Murphy on his way out. Had him play the dirty CO. You know what I'm saying? They always make you just horrible on your way out. But these dudes sign up for that because that's who these guys are. Especially if they rap, especially if they into that like that. You know what I'm saying? Like this is what they're doing. So we collectively as Moors, and I think sober-minded Asiatics need to understand that it is a industry, and it is not. And all of these guys are part of it, and all of these bodies in prison, and all of this stuff is for them to harvest and use us in this way. And this is what they're trading on the market. So if that's the case, it's our responsibility to create institutions that act as protecting almost insurance companies over all of these massive Asiatics that they're doing. But you can't do it as no Negro, because I've been speaking to real traders and people who've been speaking to real traders, and they don't deal with blacks on that level. But if you have a nationality that can prove some sort of tie or asset to the land, it's a whole different perspective. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not used to dealing with that. And like I said, you have to assume that everybody at some point, was at least approached. You know what I'm saying? But you also got to remember that Hoover was a black man. You understand what I'm saying? James Angleton was Mexican. The nigga from Good Shepherd, who basically instituted and created the career of Castro, created this dude and turned him into El Comandante almost overnight. Where was all of the movie reels coming from? Oh, that was supplied by the Soviets. Okay, well, the Soviets wasn't trying to make a national direct presence out there like that. So how did they know how to run the cameras and all of that? Are you saying the Soviets was on the ground filming? Nah, they just sent cameras. Okay, so who taught the dudes who was in the fields who had just come up from farming how to run the cameras to show what they was filming, what they was doing? That whole Bad Pigs, all that shit was staged, man. To make that whole thing look good. Everybody make Cuba out to be this thing. And in terms of the medicine, yeah. But in the overall aspect of it, I'm not talking about the people, the black people, the melanin, the Moors there. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about Cubanacan. I'm talking about the aspect of commodity of Cuba. It's straight communist. It's straight third world, man. You can't make people live like that. I don't care how Jay-Z and the rest of these niggas on TV make that shit look. It's just as bad as Haiti. They're just more politicized and more organized and used to what they have. They're not trying to get from the outside. Whereas Haiti is destroyed by all of these corporate interests that are really there for the human trafficking to harvest the baby. That's a fact. Understand? It's a fact. These dudes was involved with all of that. And the way in is the sacrifice of a child. That's why they get these dudes always with a child. Half the stuff they get them for, they'd have done that way long ago. They just coming out with it now because this person done went against the agenda. And now it's starting to shake the veil, so they gotta, make them an example. You know what I'm saying? But as it stands, the biosynthesis of melanin, this is all of that. But essentially, it is the molecule. So when you see the tree of life, like I showed you, like that's all of these molecules are this molecule coming from the same one source. Understand what I'm saying? They all representation of the same force, meaning within each granule, right, of the so-called melanin itself, right? This is why they're crazy and why you don't volunteer to be one of their experiments. Because what they're really trying to do is disassociate you from nature itself. Each granule, see how it looks like rice? Because everything external in the mammalian cosmogony, meaning everything external that you see, is a representation of something that represents the arm, leg, arm, head. It's in the shape of that, from a rhino's horn to a beer bottle, to a tube of toothpaste, to a sperm whale, to a, upright fan, to, see what I'm saying, a punching bag. You understand? It's all the same thing because it's all representation of an energy that's conducive to a shape or size that transmits itself to each reality as it's upgraded, reconstructed, deconstructed, or uncreated. You understand? Past, present, and future. The future is 2 seconds from now. So look, it's already past. See what I'm saying? The next future is 15 seconds from now. So whatever I say in the process between now and that 15 seconds, look, is already the past. You see? So what are you talking about? They talk about going into the past as if it's something that you can walk into. It's something that you can vibratorily experience. But in my opinion, in terms of what the CIA is putting out as time travel, I think that's cap, the way that they're explaining it, based on how they're exactly dealing with it. Because they're still dealing with stuff post moon. Remember, we're the people that came before the moon. And then once we mastered that cycle of what the moon represented, that became the symbol that we used to represent us. Because we understood the peace that we created, that created the harmony, the symmetry between the moon and the earth. And who used that symbol? Don't say Arabs, because Arabs don't use the crescent and star. Who used that? That's right, the Moors, to represent the triumvirate, the MST, three aspects of Allah, which is the one, which is this. See how it's shaped like a body? Look, the arm, leg, head. Look how it's structured. And see right here how it's shaped like a crescent? See that? Yeah, shaped like a crescent. It almost look like it got the face. Remember you saw the time they see the moon with the face? They used to be on McDonald's. Remember the dude, the moon of McDonald's, the dude used to play the piano in the clouds? You used to have the profile of him. Look at this in that profile. And the moon is symbolic of the owl. And the owl is symbolic of the Moors, right? When you draw the glyph with the open mouth and the electrical current. You understand what I'm saying? This is what they're trying to erase. They're trying to erase our ability to build on this level by getting us to volunteer to do it, by getting people that look like us to do it when these people are synthesoid robotoids. They're not even real people. There is no Anthony Mackie. None of these people exist. They're all agents, they're all propaganda agents. And in the movie, he told you. And that's how they disclose their occupation of you, by putting it in a form that you wouldn't understand. That's entertainment. That's what the gladiator games was always set up to do. It was always set up to destroy your attention, so that way you don't realize that this dude that was in the Mexican movie with the maracas is now leading the revolution. And all these niggas is out here protesting and going in talking about they communists and they this and they that. No, you're not, man. Darwin, Marxists, they don't believe in none of that. Those are all homosexuals, transsexuals. These are the people behind organizations. Look up the Tides Foundation. These are the people that's funding all of this. Jerry Pritzker and Jennifer Pritzker and all of this. This dude. So again, this is why everybody's on the hustle and making us think that we come from them and all this other crap. It's the opposite. They weaseled their way in here and they making us think they that, but they came over here with the Siberian slaves. You see, these were the white people that you see in the old movies in the wagons coming out of nowhere, just traveling, not knowing where they from. They was just dropped off. See what I'm saying? They was brought here and then they was mixed in with the Chinese girls. See what I'm saying? And they created a whole mestizo class between themselves or not. These white people was then politicized, and the fact they was now white and that they had to do this and do that, and that the black people was gonna kill them and eat them because these black people was looking at these white people like, where these things come from? Blah blah blah. Start fighting. Then these dudes start attacking the descendants of these people who lived in teepees and all of that. You see. And so these people put themselves under the white domination, under Tammany Hall and all of that. And then those black and those white Masons created the system that became Manifest Destiny to basically destabilize the empires that was towards the west. That now we know, according to the Texas annexation documents and other documents, the Treaty of Hidalgo and all of this, that all of that was Moorish territory and Mauritania. From there all the way to Florida, all the way up to Canada, all of that. You understand? So when we see these titles and these dudes playing these movies, you gotta understand this is what they are. This is what all of them are. You can enjoy the entertainment, the music, but in terms of the message, it's always going to be divisive and breaking us down. It's always going to be somebody playing themselves, acting like this is the only act they can do. Like no real dude is going to play any of these roles. It's bad enough, but this is all they play, and this is all they remake, and this is all they bring to the table. Why here now they're going to use the light skinned dude to play Black Panther, which is cool. It's cool, but I'm just looking at how they flip the colorism, while at the same time trying to do a Black Superman trilogy. Like for what? Why do you need a Black Superman trilogy? You know how many other Black superheroes is out there? What, you gonna make them gay? You know what I'm saying? Like in the end, it's not gonna be believable. But this is what they want to phase out. They want to phase out any real male heterosexual strong character, or make him emotionally flawed or crazy, and then make the strong male lead the female, to get women to generate themselves as women, devalue themselves as women, so that way they're quicker to get mastectomies, quicker to get hysterectomies, quicker to get cut up, quicker to turn into men, so that way they could take their organs and put them into men that want to be women. and label those people as women, and then anybody naturally born not dealing with that as somehow genetically inferior. This is what big tech is. This is what the fourth industrial revolution is. This is what these black celebrities or whatever people talk about. Whatever you're a Jesuit, whatever they Jesuits, whatever they baby eaters, whatever, they all the same. You understand? That's what we have to understand. All the same. It doesn't matter whether I said Jesuits or whether I'm using the, the, the whatever system, whatever. So long as you know and you're exposing as best you can what it is and then using that to better yourself and your family, that's all you can do. Because anybody in the typical mainstream of this, obviously, you see, is on the tape. You understand? And anything they label as conspiracy theory should automatically be seen as true at this point. Anything that they're not talking about is what needs to be talked about. So when they talk about the Hebrews, as we talked about in the beginning, being those Jews that crossed over, why do you think, again, Hollywood is run by Jews? Because as you see, this was also old New Albion, meaning that this was New England. So when they got you looking at New England over there, which technically at the time was Morocco, the New England that they were setting up for themselves was the New Hollywood, the New Albion, right? The new place to kill the giants, because that's what Albion meant. Albion was killed by Brutus, or Bruton, the Moor, Brutus the Moor, after he killed him and his brother, the other giant. So you got three Albions, New England over there, New England over here, and then Newer England, which was over there in the East Coast. Excuse me, New Albion over here in California, across from the Red Sea. So everything's playing out according to the so-called prophecy, but like I said, the prophecy is about the body of Christ, and that is us understanding what we're talking about on the universal level. And until that happens, all we can do is fortify our own position. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody is impersonating somebody else except us. And due to that, our melanin is being harvested at a rate of about 20,000 people a month. Just look at the averages of missing people, missing black people, children, adults, all of that. And then times that by about 85. And yet we're still the majority. Isn't that great? Because this is what we really are. We ain't even all of that. Raising yourself to such a consciousness that you vibrate out of this. That's the goal. So those that vibrate together illuminate to such a degree that they become that. This is what we look like before the moon. For an example. But still in the form of the arm, leg, arm, head, because that is the highest form of evidence constants in the universe. Yet that universe is internal. And thus all was created outside from this light. This was the light that went into the darkness, us. And now they've separated that darkness, in a sense, and tried to quantify it into what they call Vanta Black and other nucleic acid melanin substances. Where we would actually map out areas in our places to resemble the internal trait or how the melanin is shaped. That's how deep we knew each other. So, like I said, Morris, unless they going into all of this type of stuff, and what we gonna do about all of this? Because everything gonna come from that. Because in the end, if we don't, they're gonna have all of us like this. Now, how many niggas they got like this right now? That's what this is. The concentrated essence of original people. Venom and all of that, they getting you used to it. Auto-redactive skin to be able to create outfits, all from the harvested melanin of children. That's why they put the antigen inside of baby stem cells, so that way the body accepts it as something pure. That's how much of a devil you're dealing with. And then they want to call it Lucifer, and then they want to tell you that you got to put it in your right hand. And then when you tell them that this is some religious shit and I'm totally not going to do it, that somehow I'm crazy. Anybody have any last questions? You understand? That means the cure for cancer, the cure for all of this stuff is melanin. And that same melanin that I talked to y'all about last week, where did it come from? Who was the first people to synthesize it? The Moors. It was who they now call the Dacian dye, also called the Tyrian purple, originally extracted from the shellfish, the Murex shellfish. Look at how similar it is to melanin, which means it has a DMT factor, which means it can access higher dimensions in consciousness, which means if you ingest this, which they did, you could purify your blood and everything else, which is why you don't see no evidence of cancer or any type of disease in the ancient peoples like that. You see it around the Egyptians, but a lot of that is radiation poisoning due to the war that went on out there that oxidized everything and turned everything to glass, which is why they wore wigs. This is facts. So again, they even got the process on how to extract the proper melanin out of everything from us. You understand? But which us? The Moorish us, the Tyrian us, the Phoenician us, the Mauritanian us, the Carthaginian us. You understand? The Tartarian us, the barbarian us, the Moorish or the Moor us, the Morrish us. And again, ish means denoting nationality. It only means like if you have no nationality. So anybody talking, usually it means like and this and that. Usually ask them what their nationality is. They probably don't know or don't have one. So as we close, the Australian Government of Health has no record of COVID-19 virus isolated from any human on the planet. You can look this up yourself from the Australian Government Department of Health. Download it for yourself so we can fix it to your affidavits. They just said that they found no evidence of COVID on any person on Earth in their database, and they have the global database. So this is also why they can't make it mandatory. So like I said, the way to go is affidavits and stuff on that by getting verified data like this to represent that, or writing the uh, Department of Health and CDC or whatever yourself and asking them to prove that they have evidence that they've done that based on this report from the Australian government. You can do that yourself. And they will write you back and tell you no. And there, that becomes the evidence of the fact that this whole thing is then something else. You know what I'm saying? So, anybody have any questions before we close out? Kubrick confessed to what? Islam. What did Kubrick confess to? Oh, he confessed that it was fake, right? Yeah. They made a movie about it though called Moonwalker with the dude who played Hellboy. They also did a movie with OJ about it called Capricorn One. They also showed it in Moonraker when he ran across the set with Kubrick and them filming it. So yeah, but that's also now because they know that we on to the whole moon as a satellite object of observation and influence, and us being the people of the moon who mastered it from the last epoch is probably the ones that can only ones that can deal with it. So Islam, hope everybody got something from everything, and inshallah we'll get into it next week. Peace.